Welcome to the broadcast, everybody, and thank you very much for joining me. Sometimes it just hits you, doesn't it? Even now, all these months later, it just hits you that the late Queen is dead. And this morning was one of those moments when it hit me, because last year I was sent in the post an invitation to participate in a national statistics survey on behalf of the government, as a few people received this invitation, and it came through in an envelope. I think this was back in September, just after Her Majesty died, and as you can see it says on Her Majesty's service, and you think nothing of it. And then this morning in the post I got a sort of delayed follow-up to it, because here in the kingdom there's been terrible problems with our postal system and strikes and whatnot, and this morning this envelope came through all these weeks later, so it's late as it is, as a reminder, because I never filled out the questionnaire or the survey. Very naughty, really. I should participate, but I've missed the deadline now because I've missed this envelope. But here you see the difference on His Majesty's service. And it's such a small little trifling thing, but we in the kingdom are so used to seeing Her Majesty on everything, you know, for 70 years. So it's just the little things like that. It came through in the I saw it, and it just gives you that moment and a little chill. But onwards. For the gown I'm wearing today, because some of you will inquire, and it's dark so can't be seen that well, I'm afraid, but I thought it was quite elegant. It's from a charity shop, and I think I found it for about £10, but it's very silky. It has lovely blue feathers adorning it that glisten, and a sort of slash running down it too. So a little bit of flesh on display, just a little hint, slightly avant-garde perhaps. And I thought it was something that Wallace Simpson might have worn, Bessie Wallace, without the flesh on display, I don't think. But it actually put me in mind a little bit of Bessie Wallace. And the feathers actually run all the way down to a slashed skirt. And no, I'm afraid I won't be sharing that part of the gown with you, my dears. My fruits, not on this occasion. But yes, a little bit like that Liz Hurley safety pin dress by Versace, which I always thought was actually rather ugly. I think blue glistening feathers would have been prettier. But hey, it was good publicity, wasn't it? And gave her a career. And I also wanted to mention something rather nice about YouTube that's given me a bit of hope, is that old usernames seem to have been restored under the broadcast, under the videos in the comment section. Have you noticed? It might just be on a few of our accounts, and perhaps it's only temporary, some sort of quirk of the system, but you know, they changed everybody's username into these handles, didn't they, where you can't have any spaces, and there's an at sign at the beginning, an at symbol, which I didn't care for at all, and actually really ruined the comment section experience for me. Well, for the past couple of days, fingers crossed it will last, I can see all your original usernames. I don't know if it's like that for you, but long live it, I say. Viva that old format. It's much nicer, much cosier. I can see all my fruit basketeers much clearer. Thank you for bringing to my attention the fact that Lady Susan, I almost said Lazy Susan, but she's nothing but lazy, is she, at 83 years old? Lady Susan Hussey was at church at Sandringham on Sunday. I missed that when I brought the Charles and Camilla to your attention there. Very nice to see her face. Isn't she charming? And isn't it funny? She would have been completely off most people's radar, and no one would even recognise that face or the name in the press had it not been for the scandal in her 82nd, 83rd year. But there she was, stealing the show with that lovely smile. Doesn't she look like a lovely, warm, glorious lady whose reputation was dragged through the mud, and everybody's excited she's hanging out with the King and Queen again, which she always was really behind the scenes. You know, she was never a pariah or anything. It was just publicity on behalf of Kensington Palace, who wrongly put out that hideous statement. And, well, I just don't like the way they handled that whole affair, and I know that many of you feel exactly the same about it, and I feel that she is the one that should have received a grovelling apology from Kensington Palace, William, and indeed the King. The Princess of Wales stole the show last night during a BAFTA event. BAFTA, by the way, stands for the British Academy Film and Television Arts. And she was accompanied by William, of course, looking very handsome, and she was resplendent in red McQueen. And you know that I love a bit of red McQueen, but there she was. I love those earrings that she was wearing too. We've seen them before, but they're actually inspired by the ceiling at the Royal Opera House. I think they were designed by somebody from this brand Chalk who has some sort of knowledge of architecture, so that's where she draws inspiration, but nice to see something a little bit different. And she was there to introduce the long-term campaign that will form the foundation of her future work. Called Shaping Us, it aims to improve society's understanding of the significance of early childhood in shaping adulthood and society as a whole. Well, that was last night, and before you could blink, she's at it again this morning, out and about doing her royal service and her royal duty. And she looked so absolutely divine and so absolutely desirable in the summer of life as she is, enjoying those golden rays and looking never better. Never better. You know, some will peak in the springtime, some will peak in the winter. I mean, who couldn't say that the Queen looked absolutely the epitome of beauty in her 90s? You know, various people peak at different seasons and peaks and troughs. You know, for me, Catherine absolutely upstages her spring version with the summer. She really does. But she was wolf-whistled because she looked so divine. You know, she was wolf-whistled by somebody in the crowd. Very cheeky, but I rather like it. Naughty but nice, and I'm sure she enjoyed it too. You know, she channeled the royal spirit, of course, and you couldn't even tell that she had heard it. She didn't even acknowledge it. But she wasn't offended by it because, you know, there are moves to outlaw... I can't say it without laughing. There are moves to outlaw catcalling and wolf whistling in the kingdom. Yes, this is what it's come to. It's a real thing. I know that some of you will support it. I can't believe that you're disparaging this and not wanting to protect women with you know, I know it's a controversial sort of issue. Some will be for it and some will be against it. It doesn't sit comfortably with me. You know, people will be able to go to prison for 2 years for harassing women on the street, and nobody should certainly be harassed on the street. Please don't misunderstand me. But I do think that there is a certain line, and I do think that wolf whistles, as unwanted and as well unwelcome as they are. And before you lecture me, anybody, well, you wouldn't know. Yes, trust me, my dear, I've had more catcalls and whistles than you've had hot dinners. I promise you. And yes, hundreds of times they've got a bit of a shock when I've turned round and said, "Watcha, mate."
Well, I'm the girl with a little bit extra.
Yes, they've had a bit of a shock, my dear. But, like many ladies and androgynes of all kind, my dear, there's been times when it's been an effrontery and I've thought, you know, get lost. And there's been other times when I've entertained the exchange, let's put it that way. This visit to the market in Leeds, West Yorkshire, also forms part of the launch of the new Early Years campaign. And she wore a long-line green coat with a matching handbag made by Manu Tellier and brown suede boots. Looked really lovely. She was seen chatting with local market sellers and people from the community, and she really does make the best possible Queen-in-Waiting. There is no better choice. William did so well. You know, I've said it before and I will say it again. He could not have picked a better. Princess of Wales, Duchess of Cambridge, and Queen-in-Waiting. What a fabulous, fabulous ambassador she is and will be for the kingdom. She brings calm, she brings grace, she brings beauty. And when anybody sees that girl, they just think, you know, the pride of Britain, the pride of this nation. Absolutely. Archewell has published its impact report for 2020 to 2022, their first year of operation, and they raised 13 million schmackers, but distributed only 3 million schmackers in grants, including grants for vaccine equity, relief centres, refugee resettlement, and building better online worlds. That's the most sinister one, isn't it? Their version of building a better online world. What? this utopian paradise where nobody can mention anything remotely disparaging about the Harkles, where it's just glowing publicity and praise. That's all they can possibly handle. No Daily Mail comment sections, so they're building a better online world. I don't know about that. That's what we're doing here, isn't it? At the Fruit Basket on the River Broadcast. That's exactly what we're doing. Well, they raised 13 million. You know, they've received some criticism for this because people are saying, what? So they're only giving away 3 million out of 13 million. Well, it is worth bearing in mind, my dears. We do have to give a bit of credit here and understand that this is the way that, I was going to say charities, but at least entities, because Archewell is an entity, isn't it, rather than a charity. You know, these are founding years for that operation. And it's worth bearing in mind that the Royal Foundation, for example, you know, that Catherine and William are so involved with, their incoming resources were recorded in a recent report, or perhaps one of its founding reports, as 4.8 million, and they gave away 1.3 million in grants. So Archewell certainly isn't the only entity that operates in a similar way fiscally, but because basically these entities have to build a reserve, they don't have to spend all their funds, you know, instantly. So I can hold fire there, I certainly can. What I was surprised with, though, actually, is not the ratio of income to giveaways. What surprised me was the rather small number of 13 million for Archewell. Not that that's anything to be scoffed at, and I certainly haven't given away 3 million schmackers to the poor this year, so who am I to talk, my dear? I understand that. Nor have I accumulated 13 million. But from what we've heard in the press over all these years about the tens of millions that they've been receiving, I'm not saying they haven't. What I am saying is, where are the rest of these millions going? You know, maybe we'll find out next year. I'm certainly not casting any aspersions. So, you know, Jenny Afia, if you happen to be watching the broadcast today, you know, you can stop sharpening that legal pen of yours, because I would be the last one to cast aspersions as to where those millions are going. But it just whets one's sense of curiosity and intrigue, doesn't it? This was always what Meghan understood. It was always the benefit of leaving the royal fold, because they wouldn't have to be under such scrutiny as to the merchandising and the fruits of their so-called labour. Would they? Not under the same scrutiny. They have much more freedom and legal right to conceal their goings-on and establish various entities and enterprises in states that allow them, in countries that allow them, to beguile and conceal and ferret away the goods. And I have every respect for the entrepreneur, for the entrepreneurial spirit, my dear. If you've got buns, hustle them. Hustle away, my dear. I've got absolutely no problem with that. But what I do object to is this Robin Hood affair. You know, the Harkles, Harry especially of late, is behaving as if he's just emerged from, what is it, Nottingham Forest? What is it, Robin of Sherwood, Harry of Sherwood? You know, they like to give off this impression that they're stealing from the rich and redistributing to the poor. Well, perhaps they are redistributing to the poor or the better off in some respects. But let's not pretend that they aren't also profiting wildly. And good for them. It's wonderful if their hustling of buns is making them profit wildly. If it wasn't at the expense of this kingdom, our monarch, but especially if they weren't passing themselves off as some sort of altruistic angels. No. Now, I'm rather curious to get your opinion on this, because initially I was horrified about the canopy that will be used during the King's coronation at the moment of anointing. And as you will remember, the late Queen Elizabeth was anointed under a golden canopy, which kept that ritual hidden from public view, even within most of the abbey there, as the golden canopy was held aloft. It was a beautiful, mysterious moment, as you know, and the thought of it ever being seen publicly, because it's never been seen publicly, certainly never televised before, of course. It did horrify me when I heard that Charles is considering sticking with a moment that is hidden from public view under an obscure, opaque canopy, or we hear that he is having the option presented to him of a transparent canopy. Queen Elizabeth's was a gold canopy, and if you don't know, underneath this, the Archbishop of Canterbury anoints the monarch on the breast and the hands and the head. Traditionally, the canopy is carried and held aloft by the barons of the Cinque Ports, which translates as the barons of the Five Harbours, the barons of the Cinque Ports, although it's Cinque in French, but it's pronounced Cinque Ports here, or alternatively the Knights of the Garter. But the whispers are that the Royal School of Needlework has already started work. So I don't know what to think of it. I was horrified about it at first, but then the thought of a sort of gauzy, beautifully embroidered canopy with just the hint of movement underneath it so that you can see small gestures, but you are blocked from actually having a clear view of it. I suppose that is rather enticing, isn't it, as well? And I can imagine the beauty of it. So I don't know. I shouldn't be excited about it, but whatever works. Let's see what Charles goes with. I do trust his taste and discernment in these matters. Lots of you have expressed disappointment at the whispers emanating that he will not be wearing silk stockings and breeches, the very old-fashioned traditional garments. And actually, although I was sitting on the fence about that in the past, I've come to agree with you. I agree. I think he should go full throttle and get in those silk stockings and breeches. Because I saw a picture of King George, I think it might have been during that moment of anointing, actually, an illustration, and he looked so fine. And Charles has got really nice legs, and so's William, actually, so he'll be fine for it. See, Harry wouldn't have looked great, would he? They're not his best feature. Just imagine those dangling off there. Can you in silk stockings? Oh dear. Like a spare part. Just dangling there. Oh, thank God. Thank God we were saved from that, my dears. Thank God. Sorry, my mind's digressing there, but Charles would look fine in it. And even if it did raise a smile and a chuckle here, there and everywhere, I think the publicity would be wonderful, actually. Charlie, if you're watching, get those stockings on. Come on. Show us a bit of leg in that moment. Because he will have various costume changes through the day. Lots of you left me comments saying that you were horrified at the thought of him wearing a military costume, military wardrobe during this, or the garb of the Admiral of the Fleet, because it's more meant for military events and this kind of thing, and it's too evocative of wartime memories. And I've got to say, I think you've got a really good point. Of course, ideally it would be wonderful if we saw him in several renditions of different royal garbs during the day, but I do think they should, and I might actually write to Clarence House, to the King, and encourage him to get those breeches on and those silk stockings. You've really exercised me. This is your fault, you foodies. It's the comments you left me, and I found myself agreeing with you that yes, we should see him in that full splendour. I think it's a shame that Dame Vivian passed when she did, because I think she could have come up with something absolutely fabulous. I just want to see fabulous finery, jewels, and the whole kit and caboodle, my dear. Let's have a real royal romp. Another companion of the late Queen Elizabeth has died, a very important one. And I actually met this lady once. I think it was only once. She wasn't my bestie or anything, so I'm not in mourning, but I did meet her and she was absolutely delightful. Lady Rupert Neville, at the age of 97, passed away, and she was the one. She was the one that knew the Queen so very well, inside out, and she was the one that the Queen would go to with all the gossip that she couldn't share with anybody else. This woman was watertight, and all those secrets she takes to the grave with her. She was known as Micky to the Queen, and they shared so many splendid memories through the years. Lady Rupert, and by the way, I love that. The name Rupert is possibly my favourite name for a man. If I've got any Ruperts out there in the fruit basket, leave me a message, won't you? I love Rupert. It is such a fabulous, gorgeous name. I digress, don't I? But Lord Rupert was the youngest son of the 4th Marquis of Abergavenny. and he served as a treasurer and also a private secretary to the Duke of Edinburgh. And they lived for many years at St James's Palace in a grace and favour apartment. And the king, Queen Elizabeth and Philip were very frequent visitors to the Nevilles' country house, Horsted Place. And that was in East Sussex. And also in East Sussex is Glyndebourne Opera House, which I know very well indeed, and of course Glynd itself. And I think, and don't quote me, but I think at the time that I met Lady Rupert, she was living in Glynd. And I met her through a lady who I'd formed a very special kinship with, a cosy, special kinship, and that was Lady Christie, who died a couple of years ago, and she's sorely missed and very fondly remembered. And I met Lady Christie via Sir Peter Hall. And I have very fond memories of meeting Lady Rupert. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't know that she was quite so well acquainted with the Queen, so she didn't get a probing from me. And if you're acquainted with Glyndebourne or that area, Lewes and all the surrounding countryside, you'll know that there is some exquisite countryside and greenery there. And there was a period in my life where I had to travel there a lot. And as we would wend our way through the greenery, I'm digressing here, but it's just a memory that always comes to my mind. There was this pub, and I wish I could remember the name of it. I've never been able to remember exactly where it was or the name of it, but this pub, and this was during the height of the summer months, this time that I'm thinking of, they would serve the most delicious sandwich, which is probably, if you had to make me choose one meal from my life, you know, my dying wish would be to have this simple prawn sandwich that they would serve in the sunshine in this country garden pub. So beautiful. And I had it time and time, every time we drove past for a number of months. I would have it every time. I would spend the week looking forward to this prawn sandwich. And I don't even, seafood is not my thing. I avoid it as much as possible. It all makes me squeamish, but this prawns, and it was the little kind of prawns, you know, probably frozen, I don't know, but the most delicious sauce and thick bread, you know, with a bit of salad in there as well. It sounds like nothing, doesn't it? But you know, it was the most delicious thing that I ever ate, I think. Apart from perhaps, you know, family Sunday roasts, you know, one changes one's mind because all food is delicious, isn't it? But those prawn sandwiches, what I wouldn't give you, if I close my mind, I'm digressing. And I absolutely love this photograph of the Queen with Mickey. Don't they look so incredibly chic? That is the last word in chic, glamour, with their headscarves and their shaded lunettes. I just think it is delicious and cannot be topped for sheer cool. Her full name was Lady Anne Camilla Evelyn Wallop. Lady Wallop, that's got a wonderful ring to it too, hasn't it, my dear? But she was known by one of those middle names most of the time, as Camilla. So there were a few Camillas in the late Queen's life. And she was the daughter of the 9th Earl of Portsmouth. But her mother was American-born, wonderful American stock by the name of Mary Post. Queen Camilla met members of the 1st Battalion at Lille Barracks in Aldershot in Hampshire, where she presented them with medals in a stunning woolen crimson day dress, with black boots and a Chanel handbag. And I thought this was a really nice story because it emerged that some fella by the name of Adam Simpson York wrote to Clarence House at the start of the year. This was only a few weeks ago in early January. He wrote to Clarence House trying to get hold of Camilla because he is one of these folk that scour eBay for sort of treasure trove finds or old photographs, and he likes to connect old family members with each other, old forgotten family members. Well, he bid or purchased this old photograph he found, and he didn't know who it was of. Some old black and white photograph, some dusty old thing, paid 10 quid for it. And it turns out when he Googled the name of the person in this photograph, Edrica Faulkner, he discovered that it was Camilla's great-great-grandmother, and she'd never been seen before to Camilla's eyes. So he wrote off to Clarence House, and he got a personal reply from the Queen. Isn't that lovely? Dear Adam, many thanks for the photograph of my great-great-grandmother. It is the first time I have ever seen her picture. I would say she looks a bit sad in it. With best wishes, Camilla. And you'll know that I'm a bit of a stickler for grammar when it comes to royal correspondence. And don't misunderstand me, I'm not a pedant. I'm sure I make mistakes every day of it, and I have no desire to speak as if I'm a dictionary or write as if I'm a grammar book. But when it comes to royalty, there are standards to be upheld, and I do believe that they should be upheld and always have been, an exemplar. And first of all, I chuckled and was rather pleased to see that Camilla had made a correction to the type. She had added a hyphen to great-grandmother, which is absolutely as it should be. So I thought, good for you, Camilla. But actually then I realised that she'd missed some other things off, which isn't really her fault. But, I don't think that this would pass under Susan Hussey's watch, this kind of thing, because it says, many thanks, the photograph of my great-great-grandmother. So it's omitted a for. They've missed off that word. And then it says, it is the first time I have ever seen her picture. There should be a full stop there, or a period, as you say over the pond, which I find rather vulgar, but it should be a full stop. Then I must say she looks a bit sad in it, or I suppose one could place a semicolon there, but not a comma. And also not a comma after the first great of great-grandmother. So I was a little bit disappointed that there were a few omissions there, a few errors under the hallmark of Clarence House. But this is emblematic of the dumbing down going on everywhere. People, and I've been reading a lot about this in the press recently, and we all knew that it was coming, but everything's getting dumbed down because everyone's got such a focus when it comes to recruitment on diversity. Diversity, diversity, diversity. We actually already had diversity, but we're not allowed diversity of thought anymore, just every other kind of diversity. But when it comes to recruitment, certain things are not required anymore, like knowing how to write a sentence. I was reading just this morning about many concerns going on behind the scenes. Some are scared to whisper it within the Metropolitan Police, for example, in their recruitment drives. And a lot of the standards are being eased, including standards of communication and the written word and requirements for the English language, especially when the police are dealing with communications, and writing is important to get an accurate account of goings on. This is what is absolutely vital when it comes to compiling evidence, making witness statements, and just in case anybody might accuse me of inferring that only English-born or English heritage people should be signing up, I'm not talking about whether or not they're English or whether English is their first language, because I can tell you there are millions of people from the shores of India, for example, that understand the English language far better than those from our own shores. I'm using India as an example because there is a very fine understanding of the English language, which puts many English people to shame there, and from various other nations. So I'm talking about a matter of education. There's no shame in wanting to hire people who have received an education. And if they haven't received the privilege of an education, then that's very sad, and it has to be addressed. But it doesn't mean that the police, for example, should be lowering their standards or easing the amount of qualification required to join the force. That's not the way it works. They should be doing what Catherine's doing and looking to the early years and this kind of thing to go to the cause. Thanks for popping in, everybody. It was lovely to see you. Wasn't it a tonic to see a few splashes of royal red in the form of Catherine and Camilla to kick off the week? Always gives one a bit of a lift, doesn't it? That is the magic of royalty, and we'll be seeing so much more of it in the coming months. So I look forward to that, and I look forward to sharing all of that with you, sipping the tea, having a gossip, and staying royal. Channel the royal spirit at all times. Keep leaving me those juicy comments. I've been going through a lot of them this week, trying to catch up with your thoughts and opinions, so thank you very much for that. My tip jar is in the description box below, and I will see you next time. Toodle pip.